Yeah, that's amazing, as you mentioned, right? So it's yeah, right now cross rollup messaging or basically data transfer protocol, right? It's a really sort of the crucial part. Once we have multiple rollups, especially we discuss about it, also the application specific rollup, right? So yeah, in the worst case, they can sort of go where Ethereum, the L1 to do the message sort of passing, but the cost is still too high. It would be great, like as you mentioned, right? We can do some native, like sort of cross roll up message passing. It's better in protocol level, so the security guarantee can be much better. Otherwise, we already have so many bridges system, right? Most of them are layer based. Even sometimes we call them optimistic rollup. Sorry, optimistic like bridge, but yeah, it's optimistic, but they still have like sort of attacks from the malicious users. So that's not something we want in the long run once we have so many rollups. Yeah, and then like I would like to like jump deep into some of the factors we discussed around these application chains or application rollups. As you just discussed, right, the composability is big. I mean, probably one of the most crucial factors when we think about whether we should move the application from the general purpose L1 or L2 into a dedicated app chain, right? So and do you firmly believe that we have to have it? I mean, for application chain or application rollup, because like sort of some users like who argue that for a lot of scenarios, like basically DeFi, even for DeFi, right? It's not that highly or tightly associated with the composability. And the beauty of DeFi is really about the non-KYC nature, as we all know, right? So we just use MetaMask and do all the swap or even do the trading on DYDX or some other like perpetual exchange, right? And the people enjoy the most enjoying part is really about the non-KYC nature. Do you think we can like sort of have the composability uh, like sort of for some DeFi application without composability in the near future? Or how do you feel about the composability in the KYC, the DeFi, in a post tornado cash world? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an important question. I would clarify from like my view. I think like sure non-KYC is really great. Like you could reframe that in a more positive light
Yeah.
around like having access to like global capital flows at the speed of the internet and just like not waiting for some like T plus X settlement time.
Yeah.
So like it opens up, like it democratizes the supply side of capital provisioning,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
it gives people around the world an opportunity to partake in these like financial activities that were previously like gatekept, that's the word, by like private institutions. And I think like that's a really important benefit. But as DeFi becomes more mainstream for a lot of those institutions, they simply can't trade with an unknown counterparty. So
Mm.
yeah, a lot of them probably need some notion of KYC. I don't know how this is going to look like. Like with Aave Arc, I don't know what traction they've had with like these institutions.
Mm.
I think it would be nice to like move, like stay on public blockchains, public Ethereum. I don't think we need to recreate private blockchains. But if you have a way to, yeah, like KYC users within your protocol, I think you could still have a way to do composability within an app
Mm.
chain. Just like it's like friction to get on there. Like I mentioned before, if you have a way to like token gate based on some like soulbound token, non-transferable token
Yeah.
that has see, credentials, and you have a way to do that for like protocol founders, you could probably have some like permissioning where like users could trade, developers could write on some app chain, given that they have this like credential that shows that they're KYC. So like within that space, like you just got to get over there. Once you're over there, you have all the benefits of like composability and stuff like that. In general, like I think it's nice because it does promote this notion of like permissionless innovation.
Yeah.
I think it is also it's used in practice, like like a maker like liquidation, like you're using Uniswap or like a compound liquidation, like you're doing some atomic transaction using like Uniswap. And if you did not do that, then the result is the liquidators take credit risk, I guess. And
FTX, Alameda.
Yeah. So like to what extent does a liquidator want to take credit risk? Because the nice part about it now is you need like $0 in capital because it's all flash loading. You have unlimited dollars. So you just turn it in the same block. So you could probably have some trade-off there between composability, atomicity, and just like credit risk, but it does introduce like systemic risk into the system. And so like ideally you preserve it. But there will probably be teams that explore that design space, and corporates that explore that design space and say like, we want to launch a Polygon supernet with 3 validators that we control, and it's going to be a payments use case, and we that's all we want it for, and maybe for their end users like that'll be enough. But I would hope that we find a way to like move to a more like fluid system.
I see.
I think that'll just be better for innovation.
Yeah. You just mentioned about this payment system, right? Actually, there another big example is DYDX, the perpetual exchange. We all know that last year, right? DYDX moved out of Ethereum ecosystem to build its own application chain using Cosmos LDK, right? Probably to provide better user experience and also to make it more decentralized and to have better value capture, as you mentioned, right? So they can use their token as probably the underlying gas token or for the sort of the gas fees and also for the transaction fees, right? But it's just one use case in the Ethereum ecosystem. We all know that we still have like Uniswap, Compound, RV, and also like synthetics, right? So in your opinion, why like sort of what's the factor stopping the other major application to move to a dedicated chain, right? So we all know that there's so many benefits, especially for the token value capture, right? For if they move from the a dApp on Ethereum to a dedicated app chain, right? Why like sort of they didn't move to a dedicated app chain, but instead they are having multiple clones on different EVM chains, right? So like the chains on Ethereum itself, and even for all the L2s like Optimism and Arbitrum, and sometimes also on Polygon, Avalanche, they just have multiple clones. And as you mentioned, right, it's basically we have the fragmentation of the liquidity if you just deploy multiple clones on different chains. And the bridge, to be honest, it's not great, I would say. If you have like probably tons of bridges, but the security guarantee is not that good. So, but if they can just have a dedicated chain, right? They don't have all the issue, right? They can just aggregate all the liquidity and also aggregate all the users, right, into a dedicated chain like DYDX. So in your opinion, actually, I'm also thinking about why they just have all the clones instead of having a dedicated sort of app chain. So what's your thought on this?
Yeah, I mean, for DYDX, there were, to my understanding, I haven't spoken with anyone from the team there. There were also some technology choices they had to make.
Hmm.
I think struggled with developing with Cairo,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think it like a shared like order book that was propagated like P2P amongst like a network of validators. That is like a very specific choice that probably made sense for them. The reason why I think other teams aren't doing it is probably a couple of reasons. It's interesting to look at the other side of the trade-off around performance, like as a benefit.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I like you do introduce end user friction, like it changes the end user UX. Most people, like even the UI today, you need to go to a separate UI to bridge
That's
um,
true.
some app chain. And so if you want to like I don't know, have like a game on like one like rollup or subnet um, uh, uh, to have that experience where a user like goes to a different UI, bridges funds, jumps back in the game, like it removes you from the game. You know, like it's not a very nice experience, especially for like a retail user. Ideally, the bridging itself is baked directly in the UI. And so like you don't
Mm.
need to know it. That's probably like a better way to do it. But I think that's just like really scary. Um, for DeFi protocols, like the benefit that you get from Ethereum is a very secure settlement layer.
I
And if you
see.
have like billions in TVL, like, do you want to take that risk to have recursive security that's based on your token? You
Hmm.
know, because like if the edge case, your token goes to zero, your app chain has zero security. The validators is like they're incentivized to just like take the money and run. Um,
Mm. Yeah, that's
you
a good point. Yeah.
have that if you grow to like 10 trillion TBL, you know, or do you prefer to be on a very secure battle tested settlement layer that has 400,000 blockers? So like for DeFi protocols, I think they have like a little bit of a higher barrier or like a lower tolerance for low security. I think security is like a particularly important pain point for like a DeFi
Hmm.
protocol. So again, like that is less of an issue with a rollup. Worst
Mm.
case, with a single sequencer, you have a liveness failure. If that sequencer goes rogue and it's not like posting like state roots to like a DA layer or like the proofs
Yeah.
to L, and then it's like some awful like experience to like have your end users like I don't know manually like recover funds, but they're not going to lose funds. They're just like kind of stuck. Um, uh, so like you could partly solve that, but like it still does introduce some risk to like the user. And then the last part is the notion of like inventory or liquidity, where
Mm. Hmm.
if you are like a NFT marketplace, like if you take the thought experiment of saying like you are building your own app chain as an NFT marketplace, you build it, you're like, all right, great, we have it. Like now what? Like we have to get the NFTs. How are we going to get
Yeah.
the NFTs? Well, we have to like convince all the like the uh, like artists and musicians on I don't know like Polygon to like bridge their NFTs to my uh, app chain so users
Hmm.
can buy them, but most users are on OpenSea right now anyway. So like, how
That's
are you
true.
gonna? So it's a really tough like network effect to get away from that, and you have to have like a really good reason or like a very valuable reason to take users away from an ecosystem that already has a lot of like inventory and liquidity. Like you probably need to have a way to have your own, and like that's I think what Axie did with Ronin.
Mm.
Same as well, it's like a side chain, but they were able to get users on there because they had IP, they had content, they had a game that was like fun enough for users to say like I'm gonna like do that and like bridge over. So I think like it needs to be like a very good reason. Otherwise, like you're not going to pull it off.
I see, I see. Yeah, yeah, got a point. Especially the security part, as you mentioned, right? For me, it's like the Ethereum plus DeFi protocols, right? They are building another. We don't say it's a replacement. We can say it's like an alternative to Swift system, right? It's faster and cheaper, I would say. Yeah, typically, like when we transfer across countries or borders, T2 plus is the minimum. I typically I try like over 1 week. And sometimes I have to answer the phone calls from the bank. Otherwise, I just couldn't receive my fund. Yeah, it's it's with Ethereum. Even we see that we have to wait for like 15 blocks for confirmation, right? But it's still faster, like 2 minutes, right? 2 minutes. We can get our like fund confirmed and basically we can also withdraw with various channels.
Yes,
It's just a very convenient. Yeah.
yeah, and Ethereum isn't closed on Saturdays and Sundays. It's like
Yeah, yeah, it's 24/7. It's 24/7. It's always working. Yeah, so I think the security guarantee probably the most important part, especially as you mentioned, right? Once the TVL is beyond like sort of a number, and then it's better that your system itself, at least the system itself, sort of the FDV is higher than the TVL, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense like to rerun the DeFi protocol on this system. Yeah, as you mentioned, right? Because TVL is higher, then the attacker has enough incentives, like basically to purchase enough tokens and to attack your system, and basically just try to take it over, and then probably just grab all the money into his own pocket, into his own pocket. At that time, like in design, basically it's fun. It should be fun because in design it's sort of it designed that way. You cannot treat it as an attack. It's just like it designed like the system is held by the sort of probably 2/3 or even the super majority of the stakes of the token holders, right? Like once they control protocol, actually they have the that sort of voting power to decide like how to handle the protocol itself, especially the tokens on the protocol. It's like they control the board, they can make the decision of the future of the protocol. Yeah, yeah, as you mentioned, right, we discussed a lot around like sort of the appchains and rollups, and we also share about a bunch of the concerns and also the necessity of the bridges. I know like you did a blog post even earlier, like back in 2021, right? So talking about bridges, I believe for the past 2 years there are a lot of like sort of achievements and also improvements on the bridges side, right? So what do you think about our current bridge space? Like what are the remaining issues of the existing bridges? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think there is still this fundamental struggle between security and extensibility.
Uh,
I think the gold standard of like secure bridges is probably like a light client bridge where you're able to verify the consensus of some destination chain and you
yeah.
have the data of the state root state tree storage tree and you're able to do like a lot of like very interesting things like with the richness of that data, but the issue has been, it's very gas intensive to verify say like signatures of like a Tendermint validator set,
Mm-hmm.
and to verify like a Merkle proof on chain because hashing is quite gas intensive if you have like a Merkle tree with like several layers of depth.
Yeah.
I think been like a lot of cool innovations that said, hey, why don't you just like stuff it in a snark? You could either so then you verify the snark instead of like the Merkle.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do that, or in like the gold standard, you put both the like proof and like the signatures in ZKP itself. And we've seen that in like select cases from like one chain to another. This is like usually like teams that are just working on like bilateral bridges. But then when you think about like the number of rollups and subnets,
Yeah,
here's like
we
that's
can do the permutation, right?
like the permutation explodes. So how are you going to catch up and do like all of those connections with like the safest flavor of bridging? And that's like a really hard problem. So I don't quite know like what the best way to solve it is. Like the tension is that developers prefer security, but users prefer extensibility. Oftentimes, like users don't really know or care. Unfortunately, I think they should. And so like that's been a really tough thing to grapple with. So yeah, I think we're at like a very interesting development point where we're trying to build like safer bridges, but we're also trying to do it in a way where it gives like some bare minimum like extensibility, where like you're connecting at least like the biggest ecosystems and yeah, I think we're not quite there yet, but there's still a lot of very interesting teams building this space.
I see, I see. I think you are the first like sort of guest mentioning about the gas cost. Actually, it's to be honest, we all know that actually for teams building bridges, we know that the gas limit is a huge like basic headache for all the teams, you know. Yeah, because like even we have the implementation ready, but if the block gas limit like cannot execute the contract or cannot execute the like sort of the logic, right? Then basically the implementation doesn't work. And for most of the chains, as you mentioned, right, actually they are light client. If we really want to do a light client verification, the logic, I mean, verification is huge. Probably ZK can be a good way. Like we can do the ZK proof, like sort of off chain, right? And then on chain we just do the verification of the proof. In that case, like we make sort of the logic change and also gas costs to the minimum. Yeah, but at the same time, it's also about the cost itself. As I know, because some of my friends are working on the ZK bridge, the number they told me that the off-chain computation itself, the cost is very high. Like sometimes it's even higher than the transaction they want to bridge. Yeah, it's the cost is not on the gas part; it's on the hardware. Like basically, you have to rent a lot of AWS GPU machines, and that part, if you just you need to handle like less than 10 transactions, it's not like cost efficient. Basically, we they have to wait probably for 100 or like 1,000 transactions to aggregate enough transaction fees to cover the cost. Otherwise, like sort of it's not worth it. Yeah, but anyway, as you mentioned, right, I think we are at the stage like we already have a lot of bridges, right? But there's still a big room for us to basically improve the existing bridging system or the bridging protocols. Yeah, and the times like sort of like so fast, and there's still the last question I want to like to ask you, like you know, right? We are doing these alternative views. Do you have any like sort of new or non-mainstream like advice you want to leave to our listeners with, like any like sort of alternative views, alternative like advice to the people in this space? Yeah.
I don't know how non-mainstream it is, but I guess like not everything needs a blockchain and not everything needs a token. So like, please don't like build another blockchain or launch another token unless you have like a very good reason for it and that you've actually like done your like diligence on it. And not to say I'm like bearish on both. Like we are primarily like token network investors, and we believe that like tokens are a business model innovation and like public blockchains give you like this decentralized like global market for trust as a service, and it's like very valuable. But I think teams should like really think critically, like why a blockchain, why an app chain, why a roll up, why a token, And I think that shouldn't be the first thing you should ask. I think the first thing you should ask is like, what is a pain point or a user problem that I need to solve? And then like you can work your way from there.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, it's yeah, even like we all know, right? The project probably you talk much more like sort of project than me, right? When you talk to them, you probably always ask the question, why you need a token, right? But in crypto space, I mean, for most of the teams, actually, they don't have the like concrete answer for it. Yeah, it's just like, in crypto, you have to have a token. Otherwise, how can we survive? But they don't really like think about like why we need a token in the first place. But I think, as you mentioned, I think it's both like mainstream advice, but also non-mainstream, because right now, not many people to really think about the token design, token stuff. Yeah, I think it's a really really great conversation with you, Dimitri. And yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your sharing, and also thanks a lot for your time. Um, and meanwhile, right, to everyone like here who took the time to listen, and thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate. And hope you found like this episode very useful. In the coming months, we are basically taking more experts and talking about this industry and also L2 solutions and bridges. Feel free to subscribe this channel and for some future episodes. And yeah, thanks for your time. We are signing off for the next time.